Before you conduct scientific research, you write a research plan. This plan contains all the important decisions you have to make about the implementation of your research, so the decisions you make before collecting data. In scientific research, you will have to make many decisions. Doing good research takes a lot of thinking. It is therefore important to think carefully about your research in the early stages, because you will have to make do with the data you have collected. Hence, you want to make as few mistakes as possible. Scientific research therefore starts with drawing up a research plan. In the research plan, you work out 3 parts: the problem definition, the design of your research, and the data collection. The problem definition entails 3 elements. It describes what your research entails, why this research should be carried out, and from which theoretical framework it is set up. In this theoretical framework, you indicate, by means of hypothesis and/or a conceptual model, the expectations you have. This micro-lecture focuses on the first 2 parts of the problem definition, the research question and the research objective. Let's start with the research question. This question describes what you want to know exactly. It is the main research question, that is, the most important question in your research. The following question, for example, can be put as the leading question of your research. To what extent does the way in which a help message is presented affect how much information is remembered from that message? Why is this a good research question? When drawing up a research question, you have to consider a number of characteristics. First of all, it should be a clear question that covers your entire research. The question must articulate exactly what you want to examine. We often want to know not only whether there is a relationship or effect, but also how large the effect is and in which direction. So we do not ask whether, but to what extent there is an effect. Hence, the research question is not easy to answer with yes or no. In addition, the question must be researchable, which means that it must be empirically observable and contain no assumptions or opinions. Philosophical questions, questions in which you want to confirm or refute an opinion, or questions of faith, therefore fall off. Finally, you must be able to investigate the question within one scientific study. So the question must not be too large, but also not as small as a survey question. If you understand these characteristics, you will understand why the following question is not yet a good research question. Is there an effect of Facebook on young people? Although it seems empirically observable, it is not an open question, and the question does not provide enough information about what exactly needs to be investigated. What effect are we talking about here? Is it the well-being of young people, or loneliness among young people, or is it something else? Facebook is also too broad. It can refer to the frequency in which someone uses Facebook or in which someone posts a message, but it can also refer to the device on which someone uses Facebook. So, too much is possible here, and therefore this question is too unclear and must be further defined. A better research question would be this: to what extent does the frequency with which young people use Facebook influence their well-being? Do you see the difference? This not only clarifies the outcome, the well-being of young people, but also what we will focus on regarding Facebook. We can formulate 3 types of research questions depending on the purpose of the question. When we want to describe a certain phenomenon or difference, we formulate a descriptive question, such as, for example, what percentage of the population voted for a Democratic Party? Descriptive questions usually start with who, what, which, when, how, what is the difference, how often, etc. When we want to know why a phenomenon occurs, we want to explain. We do not want to describe what percentage voted for a Democratic Party, but we want to know why they voted for a Democratic Party. Explanatory questions usually start with why, how is it that, what is the reason, etc. And sometimes we want to make predictions. For example, you want to predict which political party readers of a sensational newspaper will vote for. These types of questions usually start with what leads to, what happens if, etc. Explanatory and predictive questions can be about a mutual relationship, also known as an association or correlation, or about a causal relationship. When you are interested in, for example, the relationship between the type of newspaper that someone reads and political preference, we are talking about a relationship or association. We are not interested in cause and effect, but want to know how closely the two concepts are interrelated. It can go either way. The type of newspaper someone reads can influence political preference, and political preference can influence the type of newspaper someone reads. When you are interested in the extent to which exposure to political campaign messages leads to actual voting behavior, we refer to a causal relationship. This is a relationship where you have a clear cause, in this example the political campaign messages, and a clear consequence, in this example the voting behavior. In addition to the research question, you also formulate a research objective. The objective describes the goal you have with your research. It describes what you want to achieve by answering your research question. The research objective must fit seamlessly with the research question. The objective of the previously mentioned question then is, for example, investigating whether different types of campaigns for help messages lead to differences in information processing. An objective that does not meet this question would be to investigate whether health information can convince people to live a healthier life. This is, of course, a wonderful goal, but this goal cannot be achieved by answering the research question. Just like the research question, the objective must also meet several characteristics. First, the objective must fully reflect what you want to achieve with your research. Try to avoid all vagueness, be as clear as possible, and make sure that the goal reflects the whole study. The goal must also be achievable by conducting scientific research. In addition, the goal should not be too large or too broad, but also not too small or too narrow. And finally, the goal must fit the research question. Suppose you set your research goal on aiming to make all children resilient to advertising. A nice goal, but this goal cannot be achieved through research. The aim of a study is not necessarily to make children resilient or more resilient, but, for example, to find out the best strategy to make them more resilient. By conducting research, we are not trying to make them more resilient, but are figuring out how we can make them more resilient. The research you conduct can have different goals, depending on the type of knowledge you want to acquire and the purpose with which you want to acquire it. The differences between general and specific knowledge and between practice-oriented, that is applied, and fundamental research are explained in another micro-lecture. Make sure you know and can apply the differences. Note that there is also practice-oriented research that is carried out outside of science. Because we are talking about scientific research in this video, we do not consider that type of research, but merely practical scientific research. Regardless what type of research question and research objective you formulate, your research should always be socially and scientifically relevant. In your problem definition, you indicate which knowledge you add and for whom that knowledge is useful. If your research does not add knowledge to existing scientific knowledge and is of no use to society, why would you start the research? So, think at the start of your research about both the social and scientific relevance of your research. This was a micro-lecture about the first part of the problem definition, the research question and objective. Practice formulating a good question and objective. The next step in the research plan is formulating hypotheses and drawing up a conceptual model. This is discussed in other videos.